we move on to Squish by Gretel. And this was my pick for April. So it feels like I had to do this album because we had Soft Cult in January this year. And Soft Cult and Gretel, or I think she was Gretel Hänlyn back in 2023, were the two best EPs that year for me. And they were. I mean, to be fair, the length of both of their EPs they brought out that year these days would be considered an album, particularly one we'll go on to a little bit later. But yeah, she's an artist. That was my entry point. So that EP, which was Head of the Love Club. So I wasn't familiar with the EP before, which I think is a similar kind of 6, 7, 8 track one. So she's been around a fair bit before this debut album. Gretel Hänlyn was her recording name. I think that's not her birth name, but yeah, she's chopped the Hänlyn, just Gretel now. And yeah, she sort of describes herself as being very much influenced by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and kind of more kind of gothic tinged indie music. And I've certainly heard that on previous ones. Here though, I think she just goes a bit more straight down the line rock music here. And it was really interesting, after such a long build up to this debut album, listening to some of and reading some of the interviews she's had in promotion of it. It was cut in 5 days, this one. So
Wow.
She just sort of went into, there was some funny story about they had another album ready and she either made this decision just to sort of go, let's just go into a studio, book it for 5 days and just see where we land, or something wrong happened with the previous one. But it's basically that kind of rip it up and start again and just sort of believe in your ability and your band's ability to bring it, to pull it off. And I really do think it doesn't, to me at least, sound like a 5-day adventure. This is for a debut album like Soft Cult, I think comes very fully formed. I think her vocals are always fantastic. She can do most things across the vocal range. And yeah, the songs really land for me. I mean, starting with Squish, where she's pining for many things. There's some warbled vocals, which is a bit like Screaming Females, that band. It's very anthemic. Fire Blooming Trees, we get this really great guitar at the beginning before it settles into more of an indie tune. And yeah, about wanting to find human connection. Maybelline, I really enjoyed her story behind this one. She had a breakup and her nana put her arms around her and like sort of rocked her from like side to side, and like I was like wailing, and like Gretel was like, this was just like the most amazing thing and all this. So she basically wrote this song about that experience, which you can hear it in the lyrics at the beginning. And just about that shared experience of like having gone through that and across generations and having that connection. So like I think the story's possibly even better than the song, which I think is a great song, quite Wolf Alice like. And actually, again, another interview I read or listened to, she was saying that she was poppier as an artist, at least that's where she wanted to go. And then it was through Wolf Alice where she basically sort of went, actually, you know what, pick up a guitar, that's what I want to get into. So I like I say, I really get that influence across the album. But yeah, I mean, Darkness Be My Friend was my first entry point as a single for this, and yeah, it just suggested we were going to get something which would sort of realize that potential which she's been showing for a number of years now. And yeah, Witch Hunt, I get kind of Black Keys, Queens of the Stone Age vibes. And yeah, there's only maybe a couple which I think are slightly below the high standard which I think is presented here. There's Drunk on the Ballroom Floor, which is is all good. It's about looking out for a friend who's overdone it on the drink. It's maybe lyrically at least a bit more representative of that 5-day approach. And then Pick Your Heart Up. I mean, the drums seem to be ripped directly from Rihanna's Umbrella at the beginning. And then, yeah, it's compared to the others, that one just didn't land as much. But I think as an opening statement with a full length record here, I think Gretel has really, you know, done a great job. I'd really like to see her and her band live, and yeah, not much more to add really, apart from just please, like with Soft Cult, that the promise is realised when that sort of debut album arrives. So Carl, you're nodding, so I'll fire over to you next for your thoughts on Squish.
Yeah, I mean, every time you say Squish, I'm just wanting to like
the album
recreate
cover,
the
yeah.
cover album. But yeah, so I didn't know Gretel before this month. And I just want to shout out as well James Hill, who's one of the Twitter community that we mentioned kind of off air before the pod, and he actually he listens to the podcast as well, but he reached out to me ahead of this month and kind of gave me the heads up. He was like, "Oh, have you heard this Gretel album yet? It's really good," because he kind of sends me music recommendations from time to time. So as soon as it got his seal of approval as well as yours, Andrew, I was like, okay, we're probably in for something good here. And yeah, just what a fantastic introduction. Like you say, a really strong debut album that, yeah, makes a huge impression for me. Comes storming out the gates with, those driving rock riffs of the title track, her vocals belting out that all I want is to drown in love passage at the end. Yeah, just one hell of an opener that really it's one of those that comes in, grabs you by the scruff of the neck, and like just immediately gets your attention, where you're like, okay, I'm locked in now for this album. Fire Blooming Trees, loved that track as well. The guitar work reminded me a bit of Block Party in places, but then when it gets to like that jittery chorus riff, we're like moving more into like Two Door Cinema Club. It like really evokes, indie royalty on not just that track, but I'd say throughout the record as well. Love the story that you mentioned about Maybelline. Brings a whole new dimension to that song. That as you were talking about that, it reminded me of that one off the Ali X record where she wrote that song about her. Was it the woman who made like the cream, but like a skincare cream, and she ended up passing away.
Decided to,
or stop making it or something. Yeah, for some reason that reminded me of that.
Yeah, she worried about her skincare regime after that. Yeah,
that was it. But yeah, that's another good example. You mentioned obviously Wolf Alice, and yeah, I'd say if you played me that song, not telling me it's Gretel and no other details, I'll be like, oh yeah, this is a new Wolf Alice song, really good. Yeah, very reminiscent of like Ellie Rousel's like hushed spoken words style of vocals that she employs on certain tracks, and yeah, I think it just continues from there. Unbloom has got these like really big grungy riffs, and Gretel's vocals on that track almost go like operatic, like in the range that she showcases on that song. And then we get some more kind of Wolf Alice vibes with Lorelei, but that this time more of their like, balladry, one of their balladry tracks. She's got like, yeah, Gretel's got this really beautiful falsetto, and there's like these intricate, like delicate guitars going on. And it kind of shifts us into that like more subdued middle run, I would say, with Drunk on the Ballroom Floor and Darkness Be My Friend, where you kind of have those rockier moments to start the album, and then it brings it down tempo for a couple of tracks. And then it's like the end of Darkness Be My Friend that the tempo picks back up. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned that one, Andrew. That's probably again one of the highlights on the album for me. It reminded me a bit of The Big Moon, which again, alongside Wolf Alice, I'd say that's a recurring touch point throughout the record that I heard it a few times. Then Pick Your Heart Up is that short punky track, and then the one that I do need to mention. I mean, you mentioned the drum beat being ripped off Umbrella, which I definitely heard, but the other one that I can't get past is Oh Well, where it's a straight rip of Street Spirit Fade Out by Radiohead, like the guitar, and it's
Yeah, I actually had that one there.
yeah, it's I'd say that's
I
my
had
one.
Karma Police, but yeah, that was probably my Radiohead knowledge rather than.
Yeah. But no, it's like the exact same like guitar riff, and I'd say that's my small gripe with the album. Maybe is that there is just those couple of moments on this record where it's a bit like Uncanny Valley, where she maybe veers slightly too much into sounding like another artist or who she's being influenced, and almost to the point where it sounds like a copy, rather than like her own sound. And yeah, that's the one that really, like, every time it comes on, I'm like, this is just Street Spirit. Like, even though like there's other elements of that song which are really good and like completely different, it just takes me out of it for a moment. But yeah, I mean, the back end, All Is Forgiven, when we get to that stomp of Witch Hunt. I mean, you mentioned Black Keys, which I could definitely hear now that you've mentioned it, but what I had down was Jack White, as well, like with the buzzy guitar riffs and the pounding drums and all this like dark Halloweeny imagery going on. I absolutely love that song. Just very catchy chorus as well. I thought for a moment I'd put on like Mitski's album again. The fact that she was talking about like this big black cat coming after her took me back to that. And then yeah, we sort of get into that back end, and she ends the album majestically with Perfect Body, which is one of my big favorites here. I think the sentiment of, wanting to portray, perfection and beauty. I think, yeah, she carries that off like beautifully on this track. It's got those wonderful dreamy vocals and that great central guitar riff running through it, like these shuffling acoustic sounds that kind of run through the song. And yeah, it's one of those that, like, the sonic textures on that song, it's right up there for me in terms of one of the songs of the year so far. I think from the vocals to the guitar to the production, it's ironically almost perfection for me. And it's like, given what the song's about, it kind of adds that other element to it. So yeah, just a fantastic debut, like you said. And like I said, at times I think I'm rooting for Gretel to give me that alternative sound with more of her like own unique stamp and less of oh yeah, it sounds like this other artist. But I appreciate it's, like you say, Andrew, it's her first outing and there's still time for her to build out her own style. But I think for for an opening statement, you can't get much better than this. And when she sounded like Wolf Alice, Big Moon, Radiohead, all bands I love, I can forgive it to a certain degree as well. So, and yeah, like you say, I mean, Squish, Unbloom, Darkness Be My Friend, Perfect Body, there's some really strong highs on this. And for me, not really any duds either. So yeah, great debut album from Gretel.
Gemma, what are you making of Squish?
I'm going to try and not just like repeat things, because I've got lots of things in my notes where I'm like, damn, they've said that. I've got a lot of other notes as well, so it's all right. But yeah, kind of, again, similar to Karl, this was my first kind of introduction to Gretel. Vaguely, now you've mentioned that kind of, as I did my research, and you mentioned as well, Andrew, of her being under a different name. I vaguely remember that kind of in the kind of 2022, 2023 era, but I don't think I ever really delved into those EPs at the time. So before listening to the album, I was kind of doing some research and everything, reading, as you said, about that abandoned album that I think she made in its entirety with Muramasa, if I'm correct. And yeah, just kind of completely sacked that off and decided not to release it. I saw an interview where she was talking a lot about the pressures of releasing a debut album and how she wasn't entirely sure that after she did the EP that she was ready to kind of do and take that step. And it kind of reminded me, I don't know how much the figure skating has entered your algorithms since the Winter Olympics earlier this year, but it has definitely been all over mine. And there's the girl who won the gold medal, Alyssa Liu. She's been very vocal in a lot of interviews that she actually retired from skating after the 2022 Olympics, where she didn't medal, and she just kind of felt like she'd almost achieved everything she could. She didn't feel the passion to do it anymore. And she kind of took a step back, and then obviously came back 4 years later, decided, actually, I don't want to retire, and was kind of at her best. And I felt similarities when I was reading about Gretel's story about how she kind of, didn't know if she was ready to kind of take the leap. So she kind of instead took some time away, and, chose not to release, the album that she had finished and ready. And it sounds like she kind of, as you said, went into the studio 5 days, kind of put something together super quickly, but maybe it gave her that kind of that break, maybe freedom and the spontaneity and the enjoyment back to it. Because to be able to put something together of this quality in 5 days, there's got to be that kind of a lot of that passion has to come quite naturally, I think, to be able to do it that quickly. So yeah, that was my first impression, was sort of like drawing that similarity to Alyssa Liu there. So then going into the album, kind of reading those interviews, a lot of the stuff I'd read had been more focused on her story as such and her kind of approach more than sound. So I kind of went into it not knowing what sound to expect. And at the start of the opening track and the title track, Squish, it starts off, obviously, as you guys will know, it starts off quite, it takes a little bit of time to kind of build up to the kind of guitars come in and things really get going. And at the start, I kind of thought, oh, is this going to be like, your kind of sad indie bedroom pop girl music that a lot of artists are doing at the moment? So I thought, oh, is it just going to be another solo female artist doing that sort of sound? But obviously was very quickly proven wrong when the guitars came in and everything got a lot rockier. And yeah, I mean, the Wolf Alice comparisons are impossible not to make. I even it was today, in fact, I was reading an interview in DIY magazine that someone did, and I think she even mentioned Wolf Alice's debut in the interview, and kind of said that feeling that gave her and trying to capture that. So I mean, definitely an influence, goes without saying. But I feel like almost, I know obviously over time Wolf Alice's sound has evolved, and I think what Gretel's doing really harks back to Wolf Alice's kind of early days, which is nice, because obviously Wolf Alice aren't really doing that these days. They've kind of evolved their sound. So yeah, like, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Wolf Alice's early stuff, so that definitely was something where I heard it and was very pleased to hear that she does kind of explore that kind of rockier direction throughout the album. And on the first track, I just really love the line, "All I want is to be squished by you." As soon as I heard that, I was just like, it's just such a good line. I just really liked it, and I was just like, yeah, like I can get on board with this, like I just thought it was, because the album's called Squish, the song's called Squish, the cover obviously has her squishing her face, and I was intrigued to see kind of how that would come up in the lyrics, and I was very pleased with how it did. So yeah, like that was a great start to the album for me. I really enjoyed the album opener, and then listening to it throughout. As I was going kind of throughout the album, I was enjoying each track, but there weren't any that immediately stood out to me kind of on first listen. But I think that is almost a testament to how quality each song is, because it wasn't that I wasn't enjoying them. It was almost that they were all so quality that I was enjoying them all, if that makes sense. It wasn't like having a massive peak and then kind of going through a few where I felt a bit meh about, until I will say I got to Witch Hunt, because that every time I had the album kind of on repeat, kind of going back to from a good few times, and every time that song came on, I kind of snapped out of whatever I was doing, whatever I was focusing on, because it's so catchy. And as Karl said, so witchy with the kind of flat cap, everything. Lyrically, not sonically, it kind of drew to a pop artist called Erin LeCount, who is also very witchy. And LeCount is her real name. I thought that was a stage name to just be very vampire-y. Her name is actually Erin LeCount, which I think is so cool. But she, again, kind of leans into that quite dark, witchy, Halloween-y kind of imagery. So lyrically, I felt that kind of connection there, despite Erin being a lot more kind of pop centric in her sound. But yeah, I think overall I really, really enjoyed it as a project. Definitely influences on her sleeve, as you've both said, and definitely some moments where it does creep through more than others. But it's one of those things where I am with Karl in the sense that I think over time, as she releases more music, hopefully she'll be able to kind of carve her own kind of path within those influences. For a debut, very, very solid. But again, is it anything we've not heard from an artist before? No. Is any music these days anything we've not heard from an artist before? Yeah, so I don't, can't hold that against her too much, especially on a debut. And yeah, I kind of anticipate this being one where, as I listen to it more and more over time, I think a lot of songs are going to start growing on me and standing out more. But to kind of listen through and enjoy the whole, not hearing any that I think, oh, that's a skip or whatever. I think that shows how strong of a debut it is, really.
There we go, Gretel. We've enjoyed being squished by you, so that feels like the right way to end. And of course, yeah. By replicating the album cover, of course.